Hey, my beautiful listeners, we are back with season 3 of The Beautiful Side of Grief, and I'm your host, Helen Morris. My incredible guests continue to share their own personal stories of grief in so many different forms, and how they have managed to find the positives and beauty from their experiences. And I hope by listening to these honest, heartfelt accounts, you can find the tips, insights, resources, and strategies you need for where you are right here and now. And maybe one day even find your own beautiful side to your grief. So share away, as I would love this podcast to reach as many who need to hear it as possible. And don't forget to check out the episode notes as well for more information and links. Plus, the energy healing I do that changed my life forever. And this season, I'd love to share the affirmations and meditations I'm working on also, so stay tuned for those. Right now, though, my thanks to you for listening in, and let's check out who this week's guest is. Ashley and Cody have one of those really special once-in-a-lifetime friendships that only the lucky of us ever get to experience. Then, life as they know it is thrown upside down, and the normally tough-as-nails 11-year-old Ashley is suddenly forced to imagine what life would be like without her BFF. That's a brief synopsis from Heaven's Bell, whose author is my guest today. We're going to explore this wonderful book, which was written about preteens, though it's a story that everyone will be able to relate to. It's been described as a comforting hug in a book, which I absolutely love. And more than ever, we are needing resources for children, particularly for children around the preteen age, and also families to be able to talk about death, to have those difficult conversations, though more importantly, share those precious memories of their loved ones. Sherrie's resume is impressive. She is the CEO of 2 Forbes-ranked executive search firms and a leadership consulting company. Her forward-thinking approach led to her participation in an altMBA program led and designed by leadership guru Seth Godin. Yet it is her passion for storytelling, and in that, making room for some heavy conversations that motivated her to write Heaven's Bell. This is an extraordinary woman who I'm excited to be chatting to. Though before we head there, my intention for today's episode is for us to understand the value of having those tough conversations with our children, family, and friends. And as always, I'm sending you loads of love and hope and happiness today as you find your way through your own life. Sherrie, it's my absolute pleasure to have you today. And thank you, because I know that you're sort of holed up in some little area in a hotel to speak with me today. So I feel very grateful that you've taken this time.
Well, I feel equally as grateful, and I am so honored to be here to speak with you today.
So I thought I'd start the ball rolling by asking the obvious question that everyone is probably thinking: why does the CEO of several highly ranked firms decide to write a book aimed at children, and not just any old book, a book about coping with grief?
I had several people ask me that and wanting to understand the connection. And the why, my why is really about difficult conversations. And if I think about leaders and I think about my work over the last over 3 decades now, it is about what people do, the decisions they make, and how they handle difficult times in their life. My master's degree is in communication. It's in interpersonal communication. And my thesis, while boring, was on communication competence and the propensity to take conflict personally. So my whole life has always been around this angle of difficult conversations. And I actually started another book about what they don't teach you in school. So real life conversations and difficult conversations you may have in your careers. And then the pandemic hit. And Heaven's Bell was a story that I always had as a child growing up. It was my imagery of heaven and what happened to my loved ones after they died. And I just knew I needed to share that story when so many people lost loved ones. And that 8 to 12-year-old group was so underrepresented that I wanted to write a book for that age group, even though I knew it would appeal to adults as well.
Wow, that is such a good background to the story, because you are so right. We are not very good at having those difficult conversations, and more so because we're never taught to have them, to have them in a healthy adult way. You know, that's a difference. We can have the conversation, but sometimes it's so personal that we lose the whole point of what we're
Correct.
trying to convey and the messages. So, yes.
And our
Oh, I
emotions
just
get
love
in the
that.
way, because if I'm feeling stressed, I'm doing one or two things. I'm avoiding it altogether because I don't want to experience that stress, which means if my friend is experiencing a loss, I'm probably avoiding the conversation with them, or I'm encouraging people to just get over it and let's move forward and just push it under the rug, whether it's a death, whether it's something that they're upset about or their feelings were hurt. And I'm trying very hard to create an opportunity and a pathway to be able to say, maybe there's some conversation starters, or maybe there's some common ground that we might be able to explore together that will allow us to grieve in our own way, to approach conflict in our own way. And that's what really Heaven's Bell is. It's a conversation starter.
Oh, that's such good work you're doing, and definitely keep it up, because I think, look, it took me until my 50s to learn not to take life so personally.
Right.
That when people were saying stuff to me, it wasn't necessarily, for me to take it personally. And it took me half of my life to learn that, over half of my life to learn that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, definitely keep up this good work.
Thank
So,
you.
welcome. Heaven's Bell is the story of two friends and their experiences, one in heaven, one on earth. How difficult was that to write, to navigate the two worlds, to get them accurately portrayed?
Well, I think it really wasn't that difficult, because in my mind's eye, we have our loved ones in heaven that are moving along. They're with our relatives and maybe people that they haven't seen in a long time, maybe their great grandparents, or maybe people they've never met here on earth, but are up in heaven, and they're busy. And down here on earth, they're watching, they're loving us. They don't want us to be sad. We're just going to live our life, and eventually someday we'll be back together again. So the book just creates this parallel path of what Cody's doing in heaven and what Ashley's doing in her life. And we just flip back and forth, and everything evolves together until they meet again.
Yes, so beautiful. And I love that. You're exactly right. Because after I lost my daughter, Tal, I have heard her talking to me nonstop since. And she's got this, really bossy manner about her. And like she says to me, like, okay, you can have 5 minutes crying. Then you get back on the horse again. It's just so funny, but she's so right, because what she does is she allows me to grieve, but then she makes me laugh at the same time. And then before I know it, I'm back thinking, okay, I've got over that hump. Let's move on. And it's so healthy. And truly, that is what she is, and I've heard from so many people that you connect more easily with your loved ones who have passed over when you allow yourself to be open, when you're not wrapped up in that heavy, heavy veil of grief. And I'm not saying that people shouldn't experience that, because each and everyone's individual journey. But when you realize that you can let that go, and then you can start to see the signs, or hear your loved ones like I do, or experiencing it a different way, it truly is very, very special.
Yes. And the story talks about Cody wanting Ashley to do exactly what you just described. He's in heaven. He knows he's fine. He's loving it. And he wants so much for her not to be sad. And I don't think we're ever going to not grieve, but the goal is to be able to have the courage to explore what those feelings are. Because if we can get through the feelings, then we can start to heal.
Yes. It's a
and start
healthy
to have
grief, isn't
those,
it?
yes, and to have those difficult conversations, or maybe not so difficult conversations like you're doing right now. I mean, you're talking about your daughter in such a fluid and happy and real and authentic way.
Yeah. Well, she gave
It's
me
a
18
gift.
years of beautiful memories. And I'm not saying that it was picture perfect, because life is not picture perfect. There were many ups and downs along the way. But the overall sense I have from having this beautiful, sassy girl in my life is one of complete and utter joy and privilege. And I am grateful every single day that I got to have those 18 years. And I think that's how we need to start looking at it. Yes, I want to hear tomorrow. Yes, I'd have
Right.
her here in a heartbeat. But we know it can't happen like that. So it's what's the next best thing? Yes.
Yes.
So we've talked about having those heavy conversations, but is there another goal around you writing this book? Is that your primary goal, or what else
Uh,
did you want people to get out of the book?
well, I think it's a conversation starter. And what I've noticed
Yeah.
is with so many people, they don't necessarily want to engage in somebody that's grieving. It's too hard. So I'll send a card, or especially with COVID, I think the whole impetus for me was we completely lost even what little we did have with our churches or funeral homes or having any kind of celebrations
Yes.
of lives. There was just nothing. And what the story allows us to do is, if we're not in the same community, or if we can't get together, by each of us reading the story, when we're done, the story elicits the memories of our loved ones. And what I saw, because I told the story verbally 3 times, and every time
Yes.
I told it, people immediately started talking about their loved ones in a way that prior to hearing the story, it was awkward and they didn't want to make anybody else sad. I don't want to bring up my husband who passed, because I think people get uncomfortable when I do that. But when I told the story and then started saying, what did you think of the story? Or what do you think your husband's doing in heaven right now? The little ones started to come out of their rooms and out of the living room, and they would raise their hand and they would start telling stories. And the adults in the room were almost verklempt because these children were so quiet, especially that 8 to 12-year-old range, because they don't want to upset adults. They don't want to add to the burden. And so
Yes.
it was working. It was just bringing conversation and pushing people past maybe the cultural barriers or their own emotional barriers to have a place to be able to begin a conversation. So my goal was just the power of storytelling. It's just a story. You have your own Heaven's Bell story. Everybody has their Heaven's Bell story. This is just one, and mine.
So before we move back into that, because I want to explore what you're talking about, those difficult conversations a bit more, but I'm really interested to know, where did Heaven's Bell come from, the title?
I just always thought of heaven as, I don't look at it as a spiritual thing. So it's not a particular religion. It's not a religious book. It's a very agnostic book. But heaven, everybody knows heaven, right? There's heaven, there's hell.
Mm-hmm.
Heaven is above. Heaven is a place that is very peaceful and happy. But nobody really can describe it. What exactly is heaven? Is it just a bunch of
Yeah.
clouds? Is it? And so inside of Heaven's Bell, I decided that I was going to concretely describe heaven like a middle schooler. What do we think Heaven's Bell would look like? And the theme of Heaven's Bell is that bells are hung in heaven when you die. But I'm hanging your bell in heaven along with your relatives, and your bell has a certain sound. Your bell represents your world. And I describe what's happening before Cody comes to heaven. And then while he's in heaven, what the bell hangers are doing. I get a lot of feedback on the vividness of heaven. And it's just
Yes.
a middle schooler. Just if you asked a middle schooler, what do you think heaven looks like? Just that one question allows you to be able to begin a conversation about, and what do you think's going on in heaven? And what do you think he's doing? What do you think your bell's going to sound like? What do you think your grandma's bell sounds like? Who's he hanging out with in heaven? It's just so much fun to storytell and weave everyone else's stories and memories into heaven's bell.
Such a beautiful concept. As you were talking, I could just hear the tinkling of the bells, and the different tones and the different sound that would represent the person really, really well. Oh, gosh.
And sometimes in some of my studies, I've read too that concreteness is good. There's this hypothetical, she's gone, she's in heaven, she's in a better place. Some of the words can be confusing. And so I thought, I'm just going to go for it. I'm just going to work on a story that I've always had in my head that is something relatable. And a bell, even if you were to read the book and then have a bell. The first time I told the story was to a young girl, and I gave her a bell and I told the story verbally. It doesn't take that long. Once you read the story, you'll see you can tell it in 3 minutes, 5 minutes. And years later, her mother, she was probably in first grade, and years later, her mother called me and said that her fourth grade teacher asked to bring in for show and tell one of your prized possessions. And she brought in her heaven's bell and said that this is something that helped me whenever I wanted to talk to my dad, whenever I wanted him to know what was going on in my life. And so I hang it on my bedpost and I keep it with me so that if I see him in my dreams, or I have something to tell him before I go to sleep, or when I wake up in the morning, he's with me. And that's what encouraged me to write the book. A couple more stories like that. And all of a sudden I thought, I need to get this story out there for others.
Yeah, that's a precious story. So what are some of the other ways we can start to have those difficult conversations? Because you've given us a couple of ideas already. What else can we do?
Well, one of the things I've learned in my career is you have to be a good listener. So sometimes when you're not filling your void of losing a loved one with things to do, words, activities, and you create some space, some safe space to just listen. Because sometimes when people are talking, they're working through their grief, they're processing out loud, and they don't necessarily need solutions or distractions. They just want somebody to listen. And I think coinciding with that is being curious. Having enough capacity in your own friendship or grief, if you're experiencing it along with someone else, is to be curious and to lean into maybe what might seem like a sad conversation, but also might be a way to create new memories. So maybe I was at the same event as my other grieving child was, but they might remember things a little differently. And while we're remembering this and we're having the courage to have the conversation and the curiosity to have the conversation and the listening skills to have the conversation, as we're having it, our loved one's bell in heaven is ringing.
Gosh. You're giving me tingles as you're talking, because, I can just so relate to this. And I don't know about others, but as soon as I start to say something out loud, as soon as I start to make sense of something by saying it out loud, it's almost as though I've come up with the solution myself just by saying it out loud, by sharing it. It's like when you're at work and you're working on something and you can't get the answer. And then as soon as you share it with somebody, how do I do this? It's like that solution pops straight into your head.
Yes.
So I see the same thing happening here. As soon as we say, look, I'm missing that person so dreadfully, and you're saying it out loud, you're not wanting somebody to make that better, to make that right. You're just wanting to be able to say those words, to actually have an outlet, be able to express.
And to say, well, what do you miss most? When do you miss most? Just be curious.
Yeah. So what do you suppose happens when we're not having those conversations? What do you see as the effect of that? Because I imagine, this was a motivator for writing your book as well, because as well as seeing what could happen, you could also see what wasn't happening.
I think we're struggling to connect. I think some of our humanness, our ability to build empathy and strengthen the relationships that we have here on earth are suffering. We're kind of moving into our own silos. We're not being curious. We're not connecting. And I think, again, what I hope with Heaven's Bell is you can read the story, I can read the story, and we can connect through that curiosity and that description of heaven and all the different memories that we have of our loved ones. That's our connecting. That's our connection. But if we're so emotionally disconnected and distraught, or, a stiff upper lip, we're not supposed to grieve and we're not supposed to talk about that we're sad, then we're not going to make that connection and we're not going to strengthen our relationships that we have right in front of us.
Yes. We've got the opportunity to have more communication than ever through social media, like us being able to connect across from the, other sides of the world here and now. But with that ability to have that enriched communication, I think exactly like you say, we're actually becoming more and more isolated in that.
Correct.
Because we're not having those conversations with the person right next to us, or down the street from us. And yes, I see, I hear what you're saying there, and I think it is very, very important.
And it's a safe space. Yes, it's a safe space.
Yes.
Otherwise, it's lonely. And you hear that a lot from people that have lost loved ones, that it's lonely. And sometimes people don't want to talk about it, or I don't want to talk about how I'm really feeling because I don't want to burden other people or make them sad. So how can we create an opportunity to talk about our loved ones in a way that creates joy and peace and not erasing grieving? But they can walk together hand in.
The irony is that we celebrate new life. We celebrate babies coming into this world. And this is a cycle of life. With new life, there is the ending of life for somebody else. And it's a cycle. Yet, on one hand, we celebrate it, and on the other hand, we damper it down. We don't talk about it. We don't allow ourselves to feel. And I think we need to be just as okay talking about death as we are talking about new life.
Because it is life. It's our hopes and joys of a baby, but it's also reflecting and learning and celebrating and honoring the lives that are in heaven.
Yes. Now, I love that you chose this age group to talk about, to focus the book around, because they're like the age group where they're not quite moving into adulthood, but they're old enough to be able to pick up on all the cues, to understand the dynamics of human nature, and they listen, they hear, they see everything that's going on around them. And so I think it's vitally important that they have a really strong voice coming through and feel confident. And like you say, safe having that voice. So thank you so much for recognizing that there was this gap.
Yes. And there's a gap in
that age group.
Yes, there's a gap in the literature. It's, it's the, Bernstein Bears lose grandpa. And then there's the more serious work. And I am no way a grief counselor or been formally trained in any of that. So, but that middle school tweener teen age really was not addressed. In fact, I had a couple hospices that have purchased several copies of it for their children's bereavement programs. because they've got the younger side of resources and tools, but not at that middle school and high school stage.
Yet it's not limited to that age group at all, because there's a lot of feedback that's coming back from adults who are reading it and getting just as much out of it as well.
Yes. And what we're realizing in some of the feedback from the adults is, if you think about when you perhaps experienced your first loss, it is going to be around that 8 to 9-year-old range, maybe a grandparent. I mean, not that we don't have tragic things going on with school shootings, obviously the war. I mean, it's useful there as well. But in this particular story, the feedback that I'm receiving is, as adults reading the story, it's taking them back to their first experience of death and helping them remember some losses from long ago that are helping them remember and think about that differently versus, okay, move it along. I even had a Vietnam veteran read the book and tell me that it reminded him of his friends and comrades that he had lost in the war. And that it just gave him a sense of peace thinking about heaven and what they're doing in heaven, and that he'll see them again. So it's spanning across. So I think maybe we're all 8 to 12-year-olds, right? It's taking us back there.
Yes.
And the story too, inside the story, everything's not perfect inside that story. So if you think about, one of the things with the remote goodbye with COVID, it was just so upsetting to me that so many people had to say goodbye and they weren't with their loved one. And that does happen. You hear time and time again that I was at the hospital and then as soon as I left. So in the book, it's a remote goodbye. And Ashley has her phone and it's a video call. So, woven in the story are these real things that happen in real life. We don't want to talk about it. We're not there when they pass. It's clunky. Life is clunky.
Let me share with you, when my daughter had her accident, I was running late from work and I was supposed to meet up with her for dinner. So I quickly phoned her thinking she was at home. And she said, "Oh, no, Mum, I'm just leaving Napier," which was another town across from us. And I went, "Oh, okay. So where should we meet?" I didn't realize she was in her car. I said, "So shall we meet at home or in town?" And she goes, "Oh no, let's meet at home. I need to pick up my uniform for work." And she goes, "And go check out my room," because we just shifted into a new home. And she said, "It looks awesome. So go check out my room." 2 minutes later, her accident happened. Now, at first I thought, "Oh my gosh, my phone call caused her accident." And then I thought, no, because I actually drove how far you can drive in 2 minutes, and I knew it didn't cause her accident, but I had to work through that. But then I said, wow, how lucky was I that I got to say goodbye to her in a strange, roundabout way. So it's how you choose to look at it. Exactly what you said earlier. It's your perspective. Everybody's going to look at the same thing differently, but we all have a choice. So
yes, and let's bring all those memories together so we can create a new memory with more input from how much we loved and can celebrate the person that we're grieving.
Yes, because we don't know all this information.
And that's another Heaven's Bell story.
Yes, yeah.
It's vantage points.
Yes.
But instead of not talking about it, talk about it.
Yes.
So the one, like I said, I told the story just a couple of times, but I love this story. My brother had lost my sister-in-law's mother. The 2 children, the youngest girl shut down and wasn't talking. And she was probably 9, 8, somewhere in there. And they were very, very concerned about her. And this was the very first time I told the story. And I thought, well, I'm just going to be the weird aunt and tell her my story that I've been carrying around with me about Heaven's Bell. So again, in the foyer of their home, gave her a little bell. The ribbon matched the colors in her room. I gave another bell to my other niece, and she had one as well. And I told the story. And I looked at my niece and I said, so what do you think Grandma's doing in heaven? And that little girl started in, well, she's got brown hair and she's not in pain anymore. And she's riding her horse, Abe, who's young. And see that oak tree out there? That whole oak tree is full of bells. And she's riding Abe around that tree and her head is back and she's laughing.
Wow.
And I mean, you could have heard a pin drop. And my sister-in-law looked at me with tears down her face. And what we realized is that she gave us the gift of being able to remember this beautiful woman and her value to the family and all of the memories in such an innocent way. And from that point on, she was fine. She wasn't fine. We were all grieving, but we were able to more easily talk about Carol and her beautiful life.
Wow, she just needed that opportunity, that starter.
To be curious, ask the question.
Yes.
Not how are you? Are you sad? How do you? No, ask questions.
Yes.
Yes.
Open-ended questions like, yeah, exactly. What do you think they're doing?
Mm-hmm.
What do you think their life looks like? What's their favorite thing they would be doing up there? Yes. So how has writing this book helped you cope with your own loss?
Well, I had a pretty significant loss in my life a little over a month ago. My father figure, I'll say really a father, but he wasn't my biological father, but he's somebody that helped me and who I am today through my life. I met him when I was 2, and he died about a month and a half ago. Immediately, I put him in my heaven's bell, right? It's what I've always done, and I'm picturing him. But what happened is so many people have read the book that I started to get cards and letters with them being curious. What do you think Ray is doing? And I can hear his bell.
Oh.
And so it was the most surreal experience for me because everybody was with me now in this story that,
wow,
I only prior. So it was incredibly moving and incredibly peaceful that people were with me.
Wow.
And they felt they could talk to me about it and they could ask me questions and they could reference the story and be present in my time of sorrow.
Wow. Well, I'm so sorry that you lost this beautiful, beautiful father figure in your life. Seriously.
Thank you. No, I miss him.
And I know what a beautiful, beautiful feeling that is to feel that peace around your loved one. And there's nothing more special than that. So share with us some other memorable feedback that you've received from people who've purchased the book.
Oh, there's a lot of feedback from adults. I think I didn't expect, I knew adults would be purchasing it for their children or the children in their lives, but I've received so much feedback from a child, but then they read it. And the feedback that I'm getting is the story's a good story. I'm not going to downplay that, but it's what happens after the story that's the most impactful, because the story generates what's next, which is it's okay to be sad and it's okay to talk about your loved ones and it's okay to think back and bring your own emotions forward because everybody grieves differently. I had one individual that talked about not being able to talk about her mother in front of her children because it made her too sad. Her mom had been gone for a while. And then she read the book and realized her to get to the happiness and joy sharing them with her 2 young daughters. And she said, it's a game changer.
Wow.
My children get to hear about my absolutely wonderful mother and know that I'm happy to tell the stories versus I'm sad and I'm crying when I reflect on my awesome mom. So there's probably 6 60 or 70 5-star Amazon reviews. And I'm not saying that in a braggy way. I'm saying it in a way to say, have the courage to read the book. A lot of people told me that they didn't want to read the book because they didn't want to be sad. I mean, it's a children's book about death. What, are you crazy? And once they read it, I've gotten so many Amazon reviews and voicemails saying, oh my God, yes, it's sad. It's about a boy who dies, but that's not what the book is about. Majority of the book is about this cool friendship and journey and all these things that we can use as we finish the book. I had one girl in the Chicago public schools say, I don't want the book to end. Her teacher told me this. And the teacher said, then read it again. Because if you read it again, there's more messages in there that you'll see.
Yes.
Don't be afraid for the book to end. So it's every day I'm getting feedback and I'm just filled up. There's things in the book people are reading about and giving me input on that I didn't even see. Just the awkwardness of some of the conversations. There's a piece in there where Ashley makes a new friend. And so many adults will say, well, Ashley made that friend too soon after Cody was gone. And that is what adolescents move forward. And as adults, let's learn from it.
Yeah.
It's there for a reason, but it's amazing how that's a conversation starter. And then the adults will say, that's a good point. I need to take a step back and think about other relationships.
People do the same. Adults will often be very judgy about if you lose your spouse or partner or somebody like that, and then you connect.
Hasn't been long enough time.
Exactly. Exactly. You were right there with me, girlfriend.
Yes. Isn't that funny?
Yeah. But it's not up to us. It's what's right for that person. We're not in their shoes. We're not feeling what they're feeling. And, for a lot of people, they just want companionship. They just want somebody that they can feel safe with and comforted by, or for many other reasons. It's seriously. You don't have to isolate.
And we don't have many adults. We have adolescents. And adolescents can teach us so much. So much.
So I want to acknowledge the critical acclaim that you're getting for this book, because it is such an important book, sharing such an important message. And I'm pleased to be as braggy as you like about those reviews and that, because, this is helping it go further, reach more and more people. And the audience it's reaching already is so heartwarming. So I just want to say congratulations to you. Did you expect this? I mean, we all hope for it.
No, not at all. It was, I needed to get the story out, and I dedicated the book to my husband, because a book, I mean, I like to tell stories and I want to help people. But like I said, when the pandemic hit, I just thought, the stat is staggering. Like 150,000 children have lost either a parent or a caregiver. And I said to my husband, but what if it's an ugly baby? And, and he said, Sherrie, if it helps just one person, it was worth it.
Yes.
And I think it's helped more than one person. So it's probably, honestly, the most courageous thing I've ever done. I know that might sound silly, but when you're not identifying as an author and you're not identifying as a grief expert, but I think there's a superpower of storytelling. And it was so impactful in the few times that I told the story that I just thought, I'm just going to leave this earth with at least trying to provide some peace and help. And that's what drove me to do it.
And I'm a great believer in, if something consistently shows up in your life, like this story has for you, there is a reason that story is there. There is a reason that you need to share it. And so it's about honoring it.
And even more so, a quick funny story about the book. I actually went and hired a book coach because I wanted to write this book. And the book coach says, I don't do children's books. And I said, well, it's not really a children's book, but it's geared towards, she's like, no, but tell me more about what you do. And that put me down the path of actually the book I started writing first, which were the career, difficult conversations in careers and helping young college grads or high school grads. Well, then the pandemic hit, and she was doing a fundraiser, and she asked for people, if you want my coaching, I will donate my coaching fee to this gym. So I said, hey, what about Heaven's Bell? And she said, okay. So we started working on Heaven's Bell together. She said, this has to happen. This story has to be made public. Then she called her book promotions person, and she said, I don't do children's books. And the book coach said, read the first chapter. She called back and said, I'm in. Then she called an editor to edit the book. Same thing. I don't do children's books. She read the first 2 chapters. I'm in. And finally, I worked with a college senior who has never illustrated anything. And I wanted to give her the opportunity to illustrate this book. And when she did the cover of the book, she had just lost her papa. And she said, I closed my eyes and thought to myself, where's my papa and what does it look like? And that's where the cover of the book came from. And she said, wow. I don't know how much time passed, but the book came to fruition. And in the center of the book is a bell. And in the center of the bell is a heart that has wings on it, like feathers on it. Yes. I had never met the illustrator, but because they have a tendency to keep, I guess, the author and the illustrator separate. But when I finally met her, I opened my desk drawer and I pulled out a little silver metal medallion, and it was the heart with the feathers on it. And I had always kept it with me in my office drawer. And you could have heard a pin drop again. So I think it was all meant to be. So the book is really with all women, all entrepreneurial, independent business owners or needing their first shot. And so it just came organically, but I'm really proud of the fact that I asked for help. I didn't know what I was doing, and we were able to get the book out when I think the world needed it most.
And it's so easy to get caught up and stop something when you come up against those roadblocks. But you just persevered, and, that's the goal that's at the end of the rainbow, so to speak. What are you most proud of in relation to Heaven's Bell?
That it's on paper, that it's in a book. It's an Audible as well. I wrote a lot of actresses that were off work during COVID, so we were able to get a wonderful actress to talk about the book, and I did a few pieces of it. But I'm most proud that it's out there to experience if they choose.
Yes. Yeah, I'm proud of that too. So we're going to wrap up now.
Okay.
So what is the best thing that's happened to you so far today?
Getting to hear your story.
Oh.
And the fact that maybe this discussion is giving you another way to think about your beautiful daughter. Mm-hmm. And we carved out some time for you to reflect, and I can hear it in your voice that there's memories that you're thinking about as we're having this conversation.
Absolutely.
I love it.
Absolutely. Oh, that's so special. What is your proudest moment in your life to date?
I have 3 wonderful sons, and 2 of them were diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when they were in 1st grade and in 5th grade, all within 1 year. And my oldest son and my husband and I really have worked hard to create normalcy and a beautiful family together. And I think the proudest I am is that our family is so incredibly strong, and we have difficult conversations. And I think it's been an amazing journey. And I'm just proud of the family we've created.
Yeah. Oh, Oh, makes my heart sing.
Yeah, my youngest son said when he was in first grade, because Di is in diabetes. So he had a disease that was, he was going to die. And if he hadn't told me that, I wouldn't have been able to have the opportunity to talk to him about how we can manage this disease and he will live a long, healthy life. So again, there's so many opportunities to be curious and be a good listener and create a safe environment for these difficult conversations. There's plenty of them these days.
Yeah, gosh, and that's beautiful. I know type 1 diabetes is a difficult journey to have. And yes, and I had an incident where, my own daughter was paralyzed. So you go down that pathway and you learn so much from it. And again, just gratitude, grateful for being able to navigate it all and get a good result at the end of it. So well done you. That's beautiful. I love that.
I'm proud of our journey. Yes. Thank you. Thank you.
When you're having moments in your day that are not going so well and they turn to custard and you need to get yourself back on track, what do you do?
Breathe. I think I take a minute to breathe, and I become aware of my surroundings, and I try to do a little bit of self-care and start with my own place and ground it, and then create perspective. This too shall pass. What's important, and almost create that grounding.
The power of our breath, seriously, for bringing us back to the present moment, the here and now, so important.
It is.
What takeaways would you like to leave our listeners with today?
Let's see. Don't be scared to read the story. Listen to the story. My own brother took a while to read it because he said, I didn't want to be sad. It's a good story. You're not going to be sad when you're done with the story. So don't be scared. The courage to have curious conversations. Ask questions. Listen. Create silence, create space. Just listen. Stay curious and listen. And you'll be amazed at how enriched your life will be with the stories from people around you. It's amazing.
Very, very, very powerful takeaways there, Sherrie. Just want to thank you. You've just filled my heart up so much during this conversation together, because what you're doing, seriously, it's so important. That need to be having really good conversations with each other, and being able to do it with grief will carry you through in any other situation that you need to have difficult conversations in. And that's what I love about it. It's that it's a tool that will serve you well for the rest of your life. I love what you're doing. I love that you wrote this book, Heaven's Bell. And how can people get a hold of it? Let's finish up with that.
Thank you. Amazon. It's at Amazon, and look up heavensbell.com. You can read more about the story, more about me, but it's available on Amazon. And read the reviews, see what you think. I appreciate any support of getting this story out there, because I do feel like it is helping people heal.
Sherrie, so grateful for your time today. Thank you.
And I am grateful for yours. Your work is amazing, and I so appreciate the invitation to be here today. It means the world to me. Thank you for your support.
You're welcome. Thanks for listening. I hope you got some real value from this episode. Let me know how I'm doing, or if there's a topic you'd like covered, by clicking on the Healing to Be You Gmail link, or going to the Healing to Be You website. To get notified of new episodes, hit the subscribe button, and please share if you know of someone who could benefit from this episode. Until next time, be kind to you and take good care.